to do something like this now for a couple months, and after talking with my Magic friend group um, from school, from where I live currently, and even from my Magic friend group from back in high school and middle school, um, I think this is something that needs to be mentioned. I know it's all over the place on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere you can imagine, streamers, YouTube. Um, a lot of people complaining about what's going on right now. And instead of just complaining, my goal is to try and be able to have a conversation. Um, and this is kind of a plea to Magic saying, and the hashtag I chose is "We Play Magic Too." As for those that do play Magic competitively, whether it be on paper, on arena, on online, play eternal formats, play standard, whatever format you play, take it seriously. And we play Magic 2 is the initiative there, to kind of support and listen to the community as well, from not even just a competitive standpoint, but there's some newer players in the format and players that play like EDH, and like EDH is a great example. As some of the cards they need for EDH just aren't being reprinted anywhere, and it's 50 or $60 for a card. And as you can tell, over the past year, card prices have just spiked again since 2018. So that's where this hashtag comes out from. We play Magic too. I'm going to be using it on my. I don't have a Magic Twitter, but on my Instagram and my YouTube, I'll be using it, and Reddit, I will be using it. Um, so for anyone else that agrees with what the hashtag's trying to represent, feel free to use it. I think the biggest thing is we got to start having these conversations. And like I said, they've done a couple bad things and they've done some good things too. Wizards has. So I think the great thing is we can have a conversation. Everyone has their own opinion. And it's good just to hear everyone's opinions and kind of see what works, what doesn't work. And so, yeah, let's get started. All right. So, a plea to Wizards of the Coast. We play Magic too. Oops. So, a quick overview. We're going to run through what's been happening the past 2 years. Hasbro slash Wizards of the Coast business analysis. Um, I did go to one of the top business schools in the country, and one of the biggest things we always did was case analysis stuff, and I did one on Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast for one of my projects, so I feel pretty good about that. Current problems Magic the Gathering is facing. What are some of the overpowered cards we've seen in the past 2 years? How did these cards affect other formats? Kind of a look into the new cards coming out for Zendikar Rising, and how those are going to impact formats. Some of my personal opinions for potential solutions, and then kind of just wrapping everything up as a whole. So the first thing is the past 2 years of Magic. One of the biggest things is we've seen a major spike in power level. We've seen Uro, we've seen T3 Fairy, um, we've seen a lot of Planeswalkers now have static abilities. Narset, you can't draw a card. Ashiok, you can't search your libraries. And so there's all these new ways, the new Teferi, being able to activate loyalty abilities on your opponent's turn, right? A lot of new things got implemented into um, Magic, and that's a good thing. That's what R&D's job is to do. I agree. I think the static abilities on Planeswalkers, I think some are really cool, and then I think a few of them are just a little bit too constraining and overpowered. But I definitely think that's the job of R&D, and I think it's a great idea. Escape, another great example. I think Escape's awesome. The Escape ability is awesome, but for some cards, it's a little too powerful. Um, so that's kind of the card power level increase stuff. Green and blue have been receiving a massive boost in power compared to other colors. And I mean, we'll go through that as well, but that's kind of just the gist of that one. And then this is, for me personally, this is the most banned cards ever in a 2-year window I can even think of since I've been playing this game. Um, the fact that we were just seeing bans in every format almost every month is just insane. There was a month, I can't remember if it was April, May, or June, where we literally saw a legacy ban, a modern ban, a standard ban, and we may have even seen a pioneer ban from cards just printed recently, and I think that's a major problem as well. Um, the so some of the good stuff, like I said, they Wizards has done a lot of good things. A lot of people kind of overlook that. Is these sets are really fun to play in draft and limited. Um, I've seen a lot of people say they really enjoy playing their drafts on Reddit and online, on Twitter. Even I remember going to pre-releases pre-COVID with my friend group and everything, and going to draft on F&Ms sometimes, and everyone just really enjoyed it. And that's something I really appreciate from Wizards is it does bring people together in that sense. Some of the cards we really wanted got reprints. I mean, we got all 10 Shocklands reprinted. That's awesome. Super cool to see that. Some staples in other formats, like we saw a Narcomoeba reprint, even though it wasn't super expensive. That's like just an obvious one I can think of. Um, but yeah, we've seen a couple cards get reprinted, which is really cool. Obviously, Wizards didn't reprint some of the cards we were looking for, that the community was looking for, but they did reprint some, partially due to EDH growing in popularity and some competitive players, some newer players trying to look into internal formats such as Modern, aka Shocklands being really good there. And obviously, that's where the growth has come from. So quick business analysis of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast before we really take a deep dive in. Um, Hasbro, as a lot of people on may not know, has been really struggling actually over the past couple years as a company. Their only big profit gainer has been Wizards of the Coast over the past couple years. It's been actually past 2 years. It's been the only subsidiary of Hasbro that has been making a profit. As you can imagine, that's pretty scary. Part of that is due to the environment of games shifting to digital. Um, a lot of people now aren't sitting around a table playing Scrabble or Monopoly or Connect Four, a lot of those types of board games with their families anymore. A lot of kids are on their phones asking, "What's a new app? What's a new game? How can I play Fortnite?" etc. Um, and that's been where Hasbro's been trying to make a shift over to the digital side of things, and that's where Wizards has too with Magic and some other like D&D and um, other games Wizards of the Coast has. Um, and part of that too is the digital market allows for major revenue streams through microtransactions. Some of the biggest games out there: Clash of Clans, Fortnite, Clash Royale. The list goes on. Make millions of dollars a day just through microtransactions. Even though the game is free to play, people always want to be better than their friends, or even some people like to play competitively and they want to reach the top. And how do you do that? You make people pay for it. And right now during COVID, a lot of people are at home and a lot of people aren't going out and spending money. And part of that is leading to a larger increase in these digital transactions, as we've seen um, over the past couple of months. And a great example of that is MTG Arena, right? MTG Arena, how do you get wildcards? You got to open packs. Well, how do you get packs? You got to have diamonds or you have to have gold. And your gold usually caps out per day. So the only way to do it, you got to go buy diamonds. And diamonds aren't the cheapest thing out there. And to get packs, you got to have diamonds. So they have, it may not be a microtransaction system that us players really enjoy for being a digital environment. But it is allowing Wizards to make a lot of money off the paid users. And then for free to play users, sure, you're able to play, but you may not be able to have the top tier deck, or you might have to play a little bit of an outdated deck, which is totally understandable. And that's the way a lot of these games usually go now that are in the digital space. Um, Another thing too is Wizards is expanding their paper products. As you can tell, this past year, in the past couple years, actually, there's been a major expansion in paper products compared to about 5 or 6 years ago. We're seeing a lot more EDH cards. We're seeing EDH decks printed just about every year. We're seeing EDH, not EDH, but we're seeing like collector's items like Secret Layers being printed. We're seeing VIP packs and collector's edition cards. We're seeing master sets. We're seeing Modern Horizons, Ultimate Masters, Modern Horizons 2. Lots of just other cards being printed, um, and etc. As you can imagine. Another thing to note is Wizards really doesn't care about the secondary market. I totally get um, people complaining about dual land prices being super expensive or a Sylvian library being $70 now when it's an EDH staple, or Uro being $50 on paper, right? So I totally get where people are coming from there. Um, However, you got to realize this is the double-edged sword that the community's kind of put in, and Wizards has kind of taken a very cautious approach to. The greatest example of this was a few, God, 8 or 9 years ago. Mox Diamond was reprinted, and as everyone knows, in Magic there's a reserve list. Certain cards aren't allowed to be reprinted. Greatest example of those are the Power 9, the Moxes, and um, your dual lands. And those cards obviously maintain very high market value. And Mox Diamond was on that list at the time, and it's used in a lot of legacy decks, Golgari Depths, lands, etc. And one of the things was it got reprinted in a set, and it drove price down a ton, and a lot of people complained. Obviously, it's gone up a ton in price, but since then, Wizards has really taken an approach saying, look, you guys say you want these old cards, but then when they print, there's a issue with them. So I totally get that. Also, Wizards has been heavily investing into the Magic Pro League, which everyone can imagine is um, kind of new compared to the Pro Tour circuit, and it's I have my own personal opinions on that, but they are investing a lot of money in there. And then obviously they're facing challenges of COVID, just like every other businesses out there. Um, Obviously, game stores and paper products are not being as sold as much as the digital content right now for Wizards. So that's just a quick little business analysis to remember when evaluating what we're about to go through next. The goal of Wizards is they are a company that makes money first. Money is the biggest driver for them, as Hasbro needs money. Even though we are a really big community and have a large say in what happens, they're going to do whatever it takes for Hasbro to make money, and they will do whatever they can do to make money. They have marketing experts that are able to analyze everything. I totally respect that. So let's go through the next couple things. So the current problems MTG faces. We've already gone over the first half of this. One of the biggest things is that we haven't gone over those first three bullets. Is there's a major meta shift in Eternal formats. The past 2 years, decks have just been constantly evolving. Cards are being banned almost every month in these Eternal formats. And I've never seen anything like it. It's not stable, and it's scaring a lot of players away, myself included. I'll get into that later as well. A lot of needed cards, fetch lands, great example, were reprinted, but in premium products. A lot of people don't want to pay $400 to go get their set of enemy fetch lands, when if you would have reprinted them, let's say in Zendikar Rising, they probably would have been $10 to $20, just like the Onslaught fetch lands we've seen when those got reprinted. Obviously people are a little upset about that. I am myself included. And then also the pro scene hasn't been getting the greatest PR out there compared to other tournaments. The pro league obviously was recording videos. One thing people don't realize was they were paying for viewers too, for some very high view counts, compared to your SEG tours and stuff out there too. And the other thing too is the pro league was basically all standard. For new players, that's fine. They want to watch standard, sure. But for a lot of people, they want to see diversity and the formats that are being played, and SEG really, really offers that a ton. And even Channel Fireball has their main personalities out there, kind of promoting um, everything going on with themselves. They're playing different decks, um, different formats, and everything like that. And that's really what a lot of players and today really like to view. So next slide, we're going to go over some of the overpowered cards. So these I considered probably the 4 just biggest threats printed in the past year, actually. So Uro, this doesn't need much explaining. It is literally in every single format. It is dominating standard, post fan, Field of the Dead deck, the post ban on Field of the Dead and Historic. It is just dominating Historic. I don't pay much attention to Pioneer, so I'm not going to comment on that. I'm sure someone reading this or listening or whatever will be able to comment on that. Modern ban control, it's unreal. Historic now, the ramp decks are playing it, and they're playing these control builds with it. Teferi, for black, is playing removal. They're playing with planeswalkers and everything, and it's super super overbearing and leads just to some pretty boring games. And then in the mirror matches, it's just brutal. Legacy, I hate to say this, I play Snoko, and even I find the deck super boring now. Snoko plays 3 out of 4 of these cards, and I just don't find it fun. That's why I built the second Legacy deck. Um, so those are some of the major problems with Uro. Teferi. Teferi is an example of where the static ability is just a little too strong. So we see there, each opponent can only cast spells at the time they could cast a sorcery. You can't play instants and you can't flash anything. In standard, this was super, super oppressive. And then in other formats, it's still being pretty, pretty oppressive. I play in Legacy, and in Legacy, the second I landed and it sticks, and I'm able to play counter spells, and my opponent's not, it's basically game over. Even in Modern right now, in Modern in the control matchups, it's just absolutely dominating. And obviously, we've seen why it's banned in Standard and Historic because it is just way too strong. Oko, this was a card I cannot believe ever got printed. I play 3 of them in my Legacy deck, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. You basically just turn everything into 3/3 Elks. You're able to gain a bunch of life off the food token. You play a super board controlling game, and it's just hard to beat. There's a reason this card is banned in now 4 formats out of the 5, and I'm expecting it will be banned in the 5th one pretty soon, as it's just in about almost every main control legacy deck. Once upon a time, I personally really liked this card. I thought it was a really, really cool card. However, it's very obvious why this card's a little overpowered. It lets you basically search your deck for free for the cards you need, the creature or artifact card you're looking for, creature or land card, my bad, that you're looking for. And obviously, in standard, that allows you to get Uro and a couple other threats. Allows you to get a Field of the Dead back when that was possible. So it's just being able to dig for free, and some of the creature heavy decks and even some of the control decks was just a little too much. Um, and obviously, it's a little too much in Modern, as we've seen. I know Tron lists were running it, and some other lists were running it as well. For Tron, it just allows you to go get your Tron pieces and assemble Tron by turn 3 pretty easily. And Legacy, I play this in Maverick. Legacy, it doesn't feel as busted right now. I think it's a safer card in Legacy for sure. Next batch, Veil of Summer. When did green be able to draw and counter? That was, I think, if Veil of Summer was blue and it got rid of the draw a card if your opponent has cast a blue or black spell part, and it just has spells you control can't be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof. Um, to me, I think that's completely fine. The rest of it is just super super overpowered. There's a reason it's banned in now 3 formats. So don't really need to go into much description there. The next 2 cards are combo cards, Witch's Oven and Cauldron's Familiar, and we might as well just throw Mayhem Devil, and Woe Strider in there. This in Standard was probably the least fun deck to play of all time. Having to just sit there for 5 minutes at a time as your opponent just combos and you can do nothing is just brutal. You either have to get rid of the Witch's Oven, but even when they do that, they have Woe Strider as backup. And it just leads to some very uninteractive games. You're just basically playing solitaire at that point, which Wizards of the Coast is trying to avoid. So there's a reason that card has been banned as well. These Cultures Familiar has as well. In Historic right now, um, people really aren't playing the Witch's Oven Cauldron Familiar. However, Woe Strider and the Jund matchup has become pretty oppressive as well. Unless you are playing Uro control, um, it's a tougher matchup for a lot of the other decks for sure. The next one, Wilderness Reclamation. Don't really need to go into that. Just being able to untap all your lands as a control deck is just ridiculous. Um, being able to have counter spells at the ready after you just played an Uro is just pretty dumb good. So yeah, that card obviously got banned, and there's a good reason it got banned. So even though I'm a mono red player, I have to admit there were definitely flaws with red cards, right? It wouldn't be fair for me just to go after the Sultai cards, because we definitely had our own share of flaws too. Underworld Breach, even though it wasn't super crazy in standard, in Legacy, it was absolutely insane. Storm basically was tier 0 when this got printed. It was very, very hard to deal with, and obviously they got it right by banning it there. I think outside of that, it's fine, but it's literally just a Yawgmoth's Will on a stick. And Legacy, that's unreal. Next is Fires of Invention. This card was bananas in standard. Being able just to throw at your planeswalkers willy-nilly, and obviously Luca combo was a big part of this. I don't have Luca up here because Luca's actually fine now without this, and Agent of Treasury is gone. But yeah, that card was just unreal, being able to combo off on turn 4, and if you're playing a ramp, you're able to combo off a little bit earlier. Emberclave, as much as I love this card, I think it's a little too busted. Unless you're playing control and you're able just to swarm the board by turn 3 and you don't get anything removed, you can just end the game turn 4 with this in the creature heavy meta. And I think that's a real problem. Being able to cast this for 2 and potentially with an Annex out, deal 12 or 12 plus on turn 4. I've done it multiple times, and I don't think it's okay. I think it's a little too strong. Maybe if this was a 4-drop and it didn't have the cost 1 less for each ability, I think that'd be fair. Or even I want to say 3, but if it was a 4-drop, maybe it would be a lot fair. Or a 5-drop, I don't know. But it's just a little too strong, and maybe that's going with some of the other strong cards we've seen in other colors. Who knows? But personally, I think it's a little too overpowered. Next is Light Up the Stage. I love Light Up the Stage again. I'm a red player. I'm very biased towards these cards, but looking at them honestly from other colors' perspectives, Light Up the Stage is a major problem, not just in standard, but in eternal formats as well. Playing Prowess, being able to play a Light Up the Stage after you just bolted your opponent on turn 3 and go be able to find another burn spell after you've basically swarmed out your hand, play it, get rid of an opponent's creature, and just swing in for a ton of damage is not okay. It's just not. Red shouldn't have access to card draw like this. I wouldn't call it card draw, but the ability to dig. That's always been Burn's downside, right? And I've said it in other videos, Burn, the idea is you are able to send stuff out, but one of the downsides of Burn is you're able to kind of run out of gas. This card kind of allows you not to run out of gas, but it does play a part in other formats. For standard, I think it's fine. It's about to rotate out. I think it's fine. Even historic, I don't see as much of a problem in historic just due to the mass removal and life gain out there right now with Uro removal and Sultai colors and with blue to counter. It feels fine in those, but in some of the other formats, it's just a little bit too strong, I think. This next batch is pretty interesting. I kind of hit on it with the other Teferi, but being able to play Flash on a Planeswalker is unreal. So you can literally activate the plus and then keep phasing out your opponent's cards. That is insanely powerful. And I've seen it now, and I'm warning some historic players here. Get ready for Sultai to start shifting to this, where it's just board wipe, or Teamer. Board wipe, board wipe, board wipe. Keep Teferi out, get those 10 extra turns, and drop just whatever spell you need to win the game. it's going to be near impossible to beat that. So we'll see what happens with that, but a flash on a planeswalker is a no-go. Next one isn't just Luris. I know I put Luris up here. It was a major problem. But the thing here is the actual companion ability. It was very obvious that they did not play test this at all in any other formats. Luris Delver was unreal in Legacy. Luris Jund was unreal in Modern. Luris was just everywhere. And so were a lot of other companion cards in other formats. For a solid month and a half after Ikoria came out, it was literally just companion versus companion matchups. Who played better in companion matchups? And that was just not fun. Thankfully, they realized this was an awful mistake and they added the 3 ability to it, which I think is a lot better now. But that was just obvious R&D not testing, being lazy. Field of the Dead. I don't have a problem with this card in Eternal formats because it can be dealt with, but in Standard and Historic, this card has no place. Being able just to ramp aggressively, play Hour of Promise and Historic, it's just a little bit too much. This next one, this is probably my least favorite Planeswalker of all time, for Standard at least. In Standard and especially Historic now, being able to play the ramp decks and being able just to control the board, you are able to wipe out aggro strategies, and even against mid-range strategies, you are still able to wipe out and start creating element 3/3 elemental lands that most opponents aren't able to really deal with. And at the same time, you're going to have so many lands out, it won't matter if your opponent kills it. You're just going to keep producing more and more. While you also have cards like Uro, the new Baloth card from M21, the 6-drop, and Sultai and Bant for Historic. We're seeing Thragtusk and stuff like that. This card's fine. And Modern and Legacy, it basically sees no play. But in those formats, I think this card's a real problem. And even Pioneer, I've seen this card run a little bit. So yeah. And now I want to get into a little bit of some of the overpowered cards that got put in Historic. Wrath of God. Wrath of God just allowed now for those ramp decks just to be tier 0. It is near impossible, unless you're playing a mirror match, to beat these Uro strategies, these Uro control strategies. There's Bant, there's Teamer, and there's Sultai. They are literally all playing rock, paper, scissors with themselves right now because it's that hard to beat this strategy with Wrath of God. These decks are playing 4 Wrath of God, like 4 Cell to Wreckage. They're just constantly wiping the board. They're able to get these planeswalkers out. They're able to pump up these planeswalkers all the way. They're able to get Uro out. They're able just to keep swinging with Uro, gaining life. It's just becomes super, super oppressive. And at this point, it's like, as a receiving player, it's super, super hard to play a card. Sure, I'm an aggro player, and I have a hard time with this deck, but that's not just my deck. That happens for a lot of other decks I've seen in the format as well. And people say, why can't you just side in Grafdigger's Cage? Sure, you can do that, but you got to remember these cards are going to, a lot of these decks are going to have access to playing big creatures out of the sideboard and their planeswalkers along with the removal to still win. So it's definitely a tougher matchup. Collected Company is an interesting one. I think this card wasn't quite ready to be put. I think it's a card that should be in Historic, but right now I don't think it is. Collected Company and Gruul Aggro. You can just get out you can get out Bone Crusher Giant, you can get out some big creatures. A lot of the sacrifice, the Jund sacrifice and the Golgari sacrifice decks are all running it. Elves, it feels fine in. Don't really have a problem with it in Elves. But a lot of decks are just able to really just dump their hand, and in best of 1, it's kind of tough to beat. Best of 3, you can beat it with Grafdigger's Cage and stuff, but I don't think Collected Company should have been made just yet for On the Ket. Thoughtseize should have no place near Historic right now. It just shuts down strategies very, very quickly, and I think for Sultai decks are able to just dump it. I don't think, especially after people complain about Thoughtseize being in Standard when it was back in Theros and how oppressive it was. It's like no one listened and put it just right in historic. Historic, we only have like 3 sets of cards in there. So it felt just a little too strong. Anger of the Gods I put in there just because there's already enough board wipe and removal spell. Um, I wouldn't say it's overpowered, but it's definitely a stronger card. I think it's fine to Anger of the Gods realistically should be fine, but you got to remember Sweltering Sun is also a card. And given a lot of the meta, if you're playing a big deck like the Teamer decks, you're going to be playing this card all the time. But if you're playing mono red, you'll never touch this card. So it just helped out the control decks a little bit more, even though it's a red color. Sphinx's Revelation, I don't think I need to get into it. With the Bant decks, it's just a problem. Some of the others, Blood Artist, we already have 4 or 5 sack cards, and we're about to get another one in Zendikar Rising. So it's like, I don't think the sacrifice decks needed any more power. As a red player, I'm going to throw out these next two. Soulscar Mage, I know it's an Omniket, is pretty powerful. Just being able to put -1/-1 counters on creatures right now is a little rough. I think if we waited 1 more year or a year and a half before this set remastered got released, I think we should have kept going with anthologies. Would have been fine. Hazoret too. I will say Hazoret's very slow in the current meta and doesn't really do as well. So I can't say Hazoret's good enough to be overpowered. Just because there's other guys like Ronus and stuff out there too. But I definitely say Hazoret's a very powerful card as well. So I think there's still just a ton of just super powerful cards that just got thrown in historic, and it's kind of just making the meta game a little bit rough. And obviously, there's going to be solutions to it. I don't know the answer, and a lot of people are debating on that currently for the format. So, how did these cards impact other formats? We've kind of already gone over it. For standard, Sultai and Simic Uro became right now Unreal. Sultai Walkers plus removal. Unreal having access to Eliminate and Heartless Act and Uro and Nissa. Oh my god, that's just insane. Ramp decks before were really good. Bans, the Teferi Control, and we've kind of talked about these band decks already. And before, I'd say War of the Spark, and I'd put Throne of Eldraine in there too for now. The super fast mono red aggro decks were super impressive in best of ones. Now they've kind of allowed for a little bit more diverse metagame for best of ones, but mono red was very overpowered in terms of best of one. Historic, my legacy cut off here. That's fine. Historic, Bant Teamer and Sultai, pick your choice of Uros, is just tier 1. Jund Sacrifice now has just way too many cards to attack and combo off with. That it's just, it doesn't matter how much removal you play. It's just becoming super hard to deal with. And like I said, a lot of aggro decks right now just feel really bad historic. The meta game just looks like it's just combo and control, and it's very obvious that there needs to be something done for that. Modern, like I said, a lot of those cards on that list we kind of just went over are already banned in Modern. Bant Control is one of the best decks in Modern as well. Mono Red Prowess, like I said, is also another top deck. And as a Mono Red player, I don't play Mono Red in Modern anymore, but I can say Light Up the Stage is a real problem there. Lots of cards are just getting banned or causing other cards to be banned. Faithless Looting is a great example. Arclight Phoenix got printed, Faithless Looting got banned, which kind of hurt a few different strategies you could play, graveyard strategies you could play in Modern currently, and Arclight Phoenix hasn't been seen anymore really in that format, which kind of sucks because it's a really cool card. But other Mox Opal is another great example there. So the list goes on and on. And then the format is constantly just warping around the new cards being printed. Before, you would just be able to slot the new cards into a list. Now it's just the top tier deck is just coming out every new month or every new set whenever a new card just gets released and it's just busted. Legacy got cut off here, but I can say a lot of these cards aren't banned in Legacy, and it's just leading to a lot of boring gameplay. I play Snoko, and the deck is extremely boring to play now. Underworld Breach just led to gold fishing of Storm, right? So these, and even Delver decks now. Delver's already a great strategy without Oko. With Oko, it's just super, super impressive. It's making the top 16 or winning just about every event out there now. So those, we've kind of already hit on that. So next I want to go into is the Zendikar Rising. I saw the spoilers yesterday, just like everyone else, and I was a little irritated because it looks like Wizards just kind of didn't see what's been going on the past year. But there are some pros that I really really liked from the R&D space as well. Like I said, there's pros and cons to everything, and that's what we're trying to evaluate, and that's what we're trying to discuss. So here, I think one of the problems is Lotus Cobra. That is now going to be the third ramp spell, along with Growth Spiral and Explore and Historic and Standard. It's going to allow for even quicker Uros, and it also allows for an Omnath kill combo on turn 4. It's somewhere on the Reddit Magic Arena page. I'd have to go find it. But it's just a problem, and especially for landfall. It's a 2-drop landfall creature. How did that happen? Putting landfall as a static ability on New Nissa. Given, like I said, there are 3 landfall triggers and even external formats where you are able to use fetch lands. That's 2 lands and 2 counters, and the plus ability on Nissa, that's +3. That is huge, huge, huge every turn for a Planeswalker. So I think that's a problem. Uh, the new green card that allows you to that equals the amount of lands you have for power toughness. Obviously, that's going to slot right into some of the historic decks. Probably going to make a really big impact in standard as well. Still some other overpowered cards in other colors, and it just really, really looks like green and blue yet again just keeps getting more and more goodies. And I'll even say black now got, not even take blue out of there, green and black really got some goodies, and it really looks like white and red are still continuing to be ignored. I think white has had it worse than red for the past 2.5 years, 3 years of Magic, and I honestly feel bad for all the white mages out there. Some of the pros, I really do think the double-sided lands are awesome. I think getting the full art lands are awesome. And I love seeing landfall and kicker back for cards that can use it right. So let's go to the next slide. So let's go over some of these cards. Ashaya, right? In ramp decks, if you are able to play this on turn 5, it is going to be insane, right? It is going to be super, super hard to play. The next is Lotus Cobra. 3rd ramp spell for Historic. Standard allows you to get into Uro early and allows you just to keep dropping cards like the cards to the left of it super, super early. New Nissa. Already kind of went over it. It's going to be able to alt most likely on the turn after it's played. And with a counter on it after it ults too. And that's just going to allow for some massive, massive creatures to be able to drop on the battlefield. I think Confounding Conundrum should have been a white card, but obviously it's blue. And it's just going to lead to some insanely, insanely boring and long games for these ramp decks and standard and historic. And modern, I actually really like this card because it's able to deal with Titan and Scape Shift, which people have been asking for because Field of Ruin is just a little slower. So I really like that for those formats. And then the last 2 I have here, Tabarax. In standard, it probably won't do much. In historic, with sacrifice, it is now going to be the finisher because it says whenever you sacrifice a non-token creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Well, unless you got removal, this card can grow in 1 turn to probably be a 6/6 or a 7/7 and just win the game. Plus, it can gain lifelink. That's pretty crazy. Maul, I wouldn't say is too busted, but for historic, I think it's just a little bit. Being able to equip the +2/+2 to your core Spirit Dancer, your Ornithopter, your Danto's Vanguard, or whatever you need, and the second you play it, it gets +2/+2. That's just bananas to me. So if you got to have some artifact removal spells out there, but I think just for that deck, it's going to be pretty absurd in the next couple months. Next, because I'm a red player, I want to go over this. I don't think we got anything good yet through the spoilers. I know some of these cards are in foreign languages, and I'll be able to explain. Valakut Awakening. This card is garbage. The only time I think you play this card is basically when you're flooded with mana in your hands and you don't need any more. Um, the problem is it's just way too situational to play. And being able to play it as a land kind of hurts as well because it comes in the battlefield tapped. So yeah, it's not my favorite card ever out there for sure. The next one to the right is it also transforms into the land basically to the left, tapped, and if it was two, the damage on it two instead of one, this card would be playable. But because it's one, it's just not playable because the land enters tapped, and it's just I can't see this card being playable at all. The card to the right of that is basically a red step links. The way that works is landfall. So whenever a land enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. For standard and for standard, this card will see no play just because the best it can be is a 2/3. Red decks don't play Fabled Passage, so there's really no way to sacrifice a land and get this thing to be a 4/5. And in historic too, for red, we don't play Fabled Passage, so the best it can be is a 2/3. But however, I think in Zoo, Naya Zoo, and Modern, this card's going to be an all-star. I love it. Being able to fetch and get into play, just that and step links. You can play Boros, whatever you need. I think is going to be a real strategy in Modern. The next one, Spitfire Lakic, is landfall whenever land enters your the battlefield under your control, deals 1 to opponent. I think it's a cool card, but it's a 4-drop. Green got Lotus Cobra for 2. This is our best card we can get for our new landfall. Is a 4-drop that deals 1 and is a 3/4. Are you kidding me? That just shows the difference in power level. Being able to play Lotus Cobra and start generating mana out the wazoo, where Spitfire here, it takes 4 turns to get out, and by turn 5, there's probably a good shot this card gets removed or has to act as a chump blocker in every format. Whereas if this card was even just a 2 or a 3 drop, it lines up with a lot of the other cards we're seeing in other colors. So what are you going to do? Can't do anything about that. And so now I kind of just want to go over the potential solutions I have. I always see online is that it's starting to become Yu-Gi-Oh! And what people mean by that is our cards are getting more and more text, and there's way too many effects on a card. And I totally agree with that. I think if we reduce the power level on some of the cards by reducing some of the effects, it'd be fine. For example, for Uro, I think if Uro allowed you to play another land, but didn't have you to allow you to draw a card and gain 3 life, I think it would be a fair card. That's a hot take, but I think that would be a totally fair card. And that could be said about a lot of the other decks cards too. Oko, if it's +2 as a -2, I think you got a completely fair card. So just a couple lower the power level on creatures by reducing the effects. The next one is the power level for blue and green is just super high in every format right now. So how do you fix this? Wizards of the Coast really needs to start paying attention to red, white, and black, the Mardu colors, and really increase the power level there, or ban those cards in some of the other formats and reduce the power level of blue and green in the future. Totally possible. Both either or. Those are kind of my ideas. These are all my opinions. I'd love to see what everyone else thinks. The next one is listening to the community and the pro players for R&D. There are a lot of famous pro players that are on R&D. Melissa De Tora, Pro Tour top 8. Tom Ross, constantly making SCG Tour top 8s and SCG Players Invitational tournaments. You got all these great pro players. Utilize them. Start testing in other formats. I know that they say Rosewater came out and said, "Oh, we don't have time to test in other formats." Sure you do. These players love playing other formats. I know Ross is a huge legacy impact in the 8-rack player in Modern, right? These players understand how to play other formats. Let them play other formats and test out the cards first before you just go throwing them out there and saying whatever happens happens because we just want to see what happens in standard. And I think listening to the community too is just a super important thing because the number one rule in business, other than making money, is the customer is always right. And as the customers, I think it's important for us to be vocal about our opinions and have these open discussions like we're having throughout this video, and have everyone have their opinion, share their opinion, and come up with something uniform and give Wizards that data that they need to create good products in the future. Um, this next one, for me, I've kind of realized is start caring about the eternal formats. Like I said, start playtesting the cards. You got the best of the best in R&D. Let them play the eternal formats. There's nothing wrong with that. And like I said, actually start caring. There's very few modern GPs out there for or Magic Fests is what they call them now. Very few modern Magic Fests going on. There's just one legacy one a year, and I totally get it. They don't have the biggest base, but modern is one of the most popular formats out there. I think you got to grow it instead of just having, and even I'll say even standard now. Standard and Pioneer tournaments aren't even that big for Magic Fest. It's mainly just a lot of them are just limited, and that's kind of frustrating to see that you have to go play a side event to play in a real big tournament. If you're not playing Magic Gathering online, but that right now isn't an issue with COVID. For Historic and Standard, I think we're seeing the power level just be insane. When Pioneer first got introduced this past year, we saw bi-weekly bannings, and I thought that was awesome. That allowed for players to kind of see what decks work, what decks don't, what cards are way too overpowered, what cards aren't. And it just allowed for a much healthier format. And I think that's what's got to start happening in Standard and Historic. Standard right now is 4 decks, literally 4 decks. Historic right now, out if you're not playing one of the 3 Uro decks or Jund Sacrifice, yeah, I think if you take out Uro and you make it more control centered, you got a fairly and I love Historic. I think Historic does have a healthy metagame, but I think some cards need to be banned to make it even healthier. Um, and that goes for some red cards too. You can ban Soulscar Mage, that's fine by me, but you also got to ban some other cards as well with it. The idea is to keep a format healthy that people are always going to be willing to play. And then the other one, and I think this is one of the biggest ones that's gone through the community, is continue to reprint the needed cards for internal formats, but not as premiums. We basically got lied to from Wizards this past year about fetch lands and multiple interviews, and now they just announced they're going to be in Modern Horizons 2. For those who don't know, a pack of Modern Horizons 2 is around $7 or $8. The good news is the price for these fetch lands now will probably drop, and obviously they're going to sell a ton of boxes. That's great. I have no problem with that. But reprinting a lot of these cards, there's a ton of other Eternal cards. Like I'm really glad to see now Sylvian Library is going to reprint for a special commander set. I think some of these older cards that people have a hard time getting access to just need to continue to be reprinted, whether it be in the master sets or not. Even some of the ones in standard are totally fine and should probably keep doing as well. So I really like that, and they've been doing a great job of that for the master sets the past couple of years, and I hope they keep doing that and keep listening to what the community is saying. The community is a huge part of Magic, and I think that's really what needs to keep happening. So to wrap everything up, those are all my opinions I have for what needs to happen. I'm sure everyone has their other opinions, and that's totally fine. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinions. But I think this is a great starting point for people to be able to start discussing what's going on and what needs to happen as a whole. So feel free, if you listened all the way through this, thank you, really appreciate it. Feel free to talk about what you think's going on and what needs to happen in Magic. These are the conversations that need to happen and that Wizards needs to see. Wizards has an awesome survey out right now. Go take it. It's really going to be helpful for products in the future. Um, so yeah, that's all I got, and I look forward to what everyone has to say and think about this. Take care. Bye.